Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani. Welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism and narcissistic relationships. Today I'm going to take on the question or the comment of, don't you hate it when narcissists or enablers say, can't we just go back to normal? Before I get to that though, just a gentle reminder, if you haven't been, I'd love it if you'd listen to my new podcast, Navigating Narcissism. You can find information on that in the video notes, and you can listen to it anywhere at iHeart or anywhere you get your podcast. Would love to have you listen to that because it's an entirely different take on narcissism. But let's go back to this question. Don't you hate it when narcissists or enablers say, can't we just go back to normal? So what does that even mean, right? I'm sure you've all heard it. I'd love to hear it in the comments. How many times has this happened in a toxic relationship or toxic family? Can't we just go back to normal? To me, it's one of the more loaded and toxic statements that can happen in a narcissistic relationship. Maybe there's a falling out in the relationship, a betrayal, a lie, a major episode of gaslighting, a horrible fight. Whatever it is, it hurts. And for whatever reason, we know what those reasons are, most of us stick these relationships out. Time might heal some of the more prominent wounds. The trauma bonds suck us back in, as does fear. But after these kinds of painful narcissistic events, we're sort of tentative. We may not be as warm or as enthusiastic as usual. We may be more quiet than usual. Maybe we're still a little prickly, whatever it is. Then either the narcissists themselves or others around us will say, well, can't we just go back to normal? Well, the answer to that should be no. We can't go back to normal because this relationship has never been normal. So if you're going back to what it was, well, let's face it, that's not normal. It's toxic and manipulative and inconsistent and uncomfortable. However, that's probably a bigger answer than you can give, because when it's positioned that way, oh, why can't we go back to normal? Once things start returning to baseline, people might think, oh, look, you're getting along again. Things are back to normal. When people say that to you, that can feel a little gaslighty because things were never normal. And just because you're not in the midst of a horrifying betrayal or screaming or tears, that doesn't make it normal. But when people tell you that, hey, it's a normal-ish day, so things must be back to normal, it can be very frustrating and also normalizes toxic and unhealthy patterns. Narcissistic people have an uncanny ability to have a horrible interaction with you, or to say something terrible to you, or to do something terrible to you, and then think that after one night, or maybe a few hours, or even a few days, that everything's good. That just because they gave you a half-assed apology, or came clean on something, or explained themselves, that everything is back to normal. That can also leave you feeling so confused because narcissistic and toxic folks can so quickly go back to baseline, right? Everything's fine while you're still reeling. And there's a reason for that. It's largely because narcissistic people just don't go deep in their relationships. Their relationships are so superficial, pretty much designed for them to get supply, that any disruption in the relationship just feels like a little bump in the road. They may scream and yell about it, but once they kind of get back themselves to where they want, even though it was devastating for you, they're like, everything's normal now. I had my tantrum. Then what happens is that you get pathologized for holding a grudge or for why can't you just go back to normal? But because this roller coaster takes a toll on you, they really don't care. You're clearly having a different relationship experience than them. This phrase of, can't we just go back to normal, is also a tool of the enablers who have no problem with you being the sacrificial lamb, so everyone's lives can just keep rolling as usual. So going back to normal is just code for, can't you just keep the status quo so the rest of us don't need to be uncomfortable? This often happens in narcissistic family systems. Phrases like, can't you just let it go and just let us go back to normal, that kind of stuff. This kind of groupthink and pressure led by the narcissistic family member can often mean that scapegoats in particular are made to look petty and unhinged because they aren't just popping back to normal after being abused and manipulated. And the lack of empathy means that people really don't care about the toll it is taking on the person in the family who is getting the worst of it. Workplaces are vulnerable to this too. There may be a difficult experience or lots of difficult experiences in a workplace, and a toxic boss or a toxic manager or colleague just wanting to sweep it under the rug and say, come on everyone, let's just get back to normal. This may also happen in the wake of pushback on policies in the workplace that call for more accountability, and people, particularly toxic people, may say, don't you just wish we could just go back to normal? I guess when there was no accountability. So in any narcissistic relationships, this idea of let's just go back to normal, it's a ridiculous statement because there never was normal. It never worked right. So obviously going back to normal is an impossible destination. It doesn't exist. There is no such place or time. When folks tell you they just want it to go back to normal, what they are really saying is, can you just stop having a reaction to this toxic relationship and just let that narcissistic person just keep doing whatever they want and not push back? And in my book, that is never going to be normal. But if you've heard this, again, drop it in the comments if you have, this idea of can't we just go back to normal? You never could. And for narcissistic folks, they want to have their blow-ups and their explosions and their tantrums and then just go through life as though nothing happened. It's also a gaslighting move because you're saying, didn't something really big just happen? And they're just yucking it up and saying, ha, hey, you want some toast for breakfast? And you really do feel like you're in the twilight zone. And that's not normal either. Thanks again.